Welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I'm your host, Cal.
And I am your host, Alex. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Koibito, the winner of Marchesa 2022, the recent in-person 120-player CEDH tournament put on by Monarch Events. Not only did he win the event, he also went on a crazy 7-0 run that plenty of people didn't see coming. More on that later. Thanks for being here, Koibito.
Thanks for having me. It's really cool to be a part of the community, and Marchesa was a blast.
Before we go any further, I wanted to talk quickly about our sponsors. They are TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and Patreon. If you're looking to get cards and you're not going to your local game store, give TCG Player a try for the best prices on the internet. When you receive them, make sure to protect them with Dragon Shield accessories, just like Playing with Power does with our very own personal collections. You can even get your very own Playing with Power logo Dragon Shield sleeves on our website right now. After that, take those cards for a spin during our webcam leagues, tournaments, and Patreon days over on our Patreon supporter Discord. You get all kinds of benefits for your direct support. Finally, our merchandise store is back. We did not like the quality of our last store, so we did some research and found a great new provider. The merchandise is much better in our opinion, and we're constantly adding new designs all the time, like CEDH, Winota, Snowball, Stacks, just all kind of fun stuff. Whatever Mike comes up with, I'm sure you'll love it all. Check out the podcast description for the links to everything mentioned here today. And of course, we got to do our traditional Patreon shout out.
Absolutely. Shout out to Derek McCoy, aka the real McCoy. Thank you for so much for the support, and we are happy to have you as part of our patrons.
Yeah. So, thanks for sitting through that, everybody. Advertising is how we keep the lights on around here. And by the lights on, I mean just making content. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so again, why we're here today, we have an awesome guest, Koibito, the winner of the Marchesa 2022 tournament out in Seattle. It was crazy to be there. I was there. I had the luck and fun of making top 16. Of course, top 16 is where my run ended as I watched Koibito crush the competition right next to me in the feature match area. Koibito, let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you start playing Magic? Why do you like playing CEDH, all that kind of stuff? A little bit about
do you
yourself.
like long walks on the beach?
Sometimes. My name is Brian again. It's great to be here. And Marchesa was so much fun. So I've been playing Magic since Portal, and I started playing competitively when Onslaught came out. I played Onslaught Standard as well as Vintage back in the day because that was one of the formats. I liked Mono Red the whole time. I played a lot of Mono Red in my life. I've always played RDW when it's standard viable. Magic is a super fun game. I think that I've always been attracted to the tremendous depth that Magic as a game has. It's like chess is obviously an incredible game. It doesn't have the fun. You don't get to tap your stuff the same kind of way, and it doesn't seem, even though I don't feel chess is anywhere near solved, maybe it is. I know there's been some chatter about that. Magic has just this feeling of infinite possibilities that chess doesn't seem to have, and I love it. I think it's a very fun place to spend my time thinking. So
Awesome. Now the real question is, why? Why did you choose Magda? And also tell us about Magda, because not a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say that anymore. A lot of people know what Magda is now because of you.
Yeah, it's all your fault.
It's all your fault. But why did you choose it, and tell us about it, because I know that it has been a fire lit under me.
For sure. Honestly, Marchesa was interesting because I didn't think I was going to be able to play. I signed up for Marchesa late, and I was on a wait list. I didn't know that I'd be allowed to play or participate in the tournament until the Thursday before the event. So I only had 2 or 3 days to prep. And with that time in mind, Magda, it's a very strong deck. There are a ton of reasons I think it's super viable in the metagame. And it happened to be the deck that I had the most playtesting experience with in the last few months. So since I didn't have enough time to develop something new just for Marchesa, I kind of went with where my instincts were, which is I've got time on this. I know this pretty thoroughly in and out. Whenever I get into a hard spot, this is the deck I feel like I can wiggle out of that spot with because I've got the time played on it recently. So that was a huge part of my decision about why I chose to play Magda specifically. There's another question kind of hidden in there that it's like, well, why even practice Magda? Like, why did I even build or start testing that to begin with, CEDH is a super fun event, super fun format, but there's so much that happens so quickly. And so many of the metagame cards like Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, there are so many counter instant or sorcery or even non-creature spells that like thrive in the format, right? Like I think anytime you see somebody with an island or a blue source, you know that they're on like at least 6 or 8 of these. And I love that Magda, not only does it come out on turn 2, so it's kind of under the radar for a lot of the stacks pieces that can be preventative. Like if I'm beating Drannith in turn order, I can get in play before Drannith maybe. But once Magda's in play, I technically don't need to play another spell. I could threaten to win the game. It might take 10 turns at that point, 1 treasure per turn. But I could theoretically win the game without playing a single additional spell, much less one that could be countered by these very narrow counter spells. So the fact that Magda gets in play so quickly, it doesn't rely on spells being cast to win the game, and it can win at instant speed in reaction to my opponents. These are the largest reasons I felt like Magda was a super powerful deck and needed to be tested more than it has been in the CEDH community.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's a lot of insight into your thoughts and that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be honest. I didn't really expect you to say that on a 2 or 3 day notice. It was just the things you had the most reps with. I wouldn't expect Magda to be a thing that a lot of people have reps on, unless, like you said, there's a lot of great reasons why you have a lot of reps on it, because you think it's an undertested deck that you think is very powerful. It can threaten to win the game through stacks. That's awesome to hear. When you were in those, that 2 or 3 day of prep, obviously you had this Magda deck you were familiar with. Did you say to yourself, all right, my play group is normally like this. However, at this tournament, I think that maybe people are going to be playing more blue farm. Maybe people are going to be playing more stacks. So I should make this kind of change to my list. So like, did you make any kind of meta or deck specific choices, like against Adnaz, against TNT, anything like that?
I guess I'm pretty lucky in this regard. And while I wasn't playtesting in preparation for this specifically, because I didn't think I'd be able to participate, I do have the luxury of working at a card store, and we do have a lot of competitive players that come through the Portland area. So while I wasn't training for the event per se, I was getting to play maybe 3 to 5 games a week of competitive EDH with different tables with a pretty wide representation of the metagame. So I felt like what I had prepared for was a lot of what I'd actually seen on Marchesa, or especially what I expected to see moving into the event. So the only changes I made were based on not my metagame expectations so much as I had found a tournament listing that did well in Japan, and this player, he ran a lot more burn spells actually than any mono red deck I'd seen in a long time, especially for a competitive EDH. He had a lot, like 9 or 10, like targeted removal damage spells. I'm like, holy smokes, that's so much. And I don't think it was a terrible choice in general, but out of respect to that Magda pilot, I wanted to run more, right? Like if he found it wise to run 9, I can surely justify going from like 2 to 6 or 2 to 5 or something. That's the only real change I made in prep for the event itself. There's another funny thing too. The burnout I played in my deck list, I submitted my deck via my phone the morning of the tournament from my hotel room. I never intended to play burnout. I was hoping that spot would be a braid, but I missubmitted burnout instead and kind of got stuck with it in the tournament.
Yeah, how did burnout perform for you over the course of the weekend?
I resolved burnout, I believe, I want to say 0 times, but there's a chance I actually cast it 1 time. I don't think so though. I don't think I played it at all.
Wow, the added hot tech was burnout. That
right, the super spicy, so spicy we don't even play it.
So spicy that we don't touch it. Too much capsaicin. Okay, so when we talk about tech, is there any tech in the deck that you thought was particularly effective? Any new tech that maybe you haven't seen before?
Absolutely. I played 3 tech cards that I felt like were kind of contradictory to a lot of the Magda decks I'd seen otherwise had shown. So I began researching Magda some 6 months ago, and at that time I feel like the deck database lists that I studied didn't include Memory Jar. Now I noted since then that one of the most viewed Magda decks ever definitely does include Memory Jar, and maybe that was just an oversight, but when I started running Memory Jar, I had cut Pirate Spellbomb for Memory Jar. The purpose of the card in the deck is to have some sort of, when you go for your combo with Elixir of Immortality, and then Lion's Eye Diamond, and then you add your 3rd card. Now this could be any card that you just replay essentially indefinitely until your opponents lose. Preferably this card is an artifact or dragon, so that it can be searched into play, so you don't have to draw your deck out in a kind of a spooky, threatening kind of way. So when I switched Pyrite Spellbomb for Memory Jar, I felt like it was a super obvious choice. Pyrite Spellbomb doesn't do that much to interact with the current meta. It doesn't kill Drannith. It doesn't kill anything that I'm really afraid of. And Memory Jar is cool because there have been so many times, even after Marchesa, where a player will attempt to Thoracle out. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, they'll move through the notions, right? They'll cast Thoracle. Thoracle resolves. Abilities on the stack. They'll hold priority. They'll cast Consult. Their library is gone. And that's where I'm like, well, one moment, please. I'd like to sack. I'd like to crew this, smuggler's copter and create some treasures. And with these treasures, I'd like to sack and find a Memory Jar. And how about we just draw 7 right now while your Thoracle is still in the stack? And that works quite well. Player after player has kind of fallen into it. So Memory Jar is really cool tech. There are some lists that were already playing it before, but that card is definitely one that I have seen many players not playing. And the fact that it counters Thoracle is beautiful.
In addition to being like, Thoracle counter tech and also just kind of good to cast sometimes, that is technically a win condition card, right?
Yes, that was my main win loop when I entered the tournament. So my main win line leading up to the tournament was I would get Defense Grid times 2 in play. I would Defense Grid in the play. Post achieving infinite tap treasures, I would sack 5 to find Defense Grid. I would sack 5 more to find Sculpting Steel, targeting Defense Grid. At this point, my opponents are pretty locked out, but me being the favoring on the safe side, I would also grab every other stacks piece in my deck and jam them all into play. Thorn, Trinisphere, everything. Guys, don't do anything, just sit there please while I try to win the game. So then the actual win con itself would be Elixir of Immortality, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Memory Jar. And the loop plays where I would first crack the jar to draw a hand. All my opponents would set their hands aside and draw a hand, but they can't play spells hopefully because of the Trinispheres and whatnot. And then I would sack the LED, discarding my hand to the yard, and then use Elixir to shuffle my hand back in. So by doing this, I'm drawing out my opponents without them ever having an opportunity to discard their cards, hopefully disabling something like a Kozilek Shuffle. So that was my primary win con when I prepped for the tournament. The only thing that made me nervous though is that recently Boseiju was printed, and Boseiju creeps right through Defense Grid and all of the other stacks pieces that I was playing. So I was kind of nervous that giving people the opportunity to draw their hands over and over would result in my death. There was another component too where it's like, if I'm convincing the players on my round that they're going to die, they're like, oh, but if I get to draw every card in my deck, maybe I'll draw an out, and that takes so much more time. I found at some point it's like, well, can't I just kill this Hellkite and then re-ETB this Hellkite over and over and kill you that way? And then like, okay, cool, yeah, that works for us completely. So that's why we ended up having the Skirk Prospector Hellkite with Maskwood Nexus, so I could sack the Hellkite and throw it in the loop instead. It's not as, I don't think it's as guaranteed to win as the Memory Jar loop is, but it doesn't have the vulnerability the Memory Jar loop does either. So kind of pivoting between the two, going to Hellkite when I felt safe and was trying to be fast, or going to Memory Jar when I needed to be thorough, and I felt like it was a calculated risk. It's kind of the way that we played.
Wow. That was, yes, I love this. This is great. Like, it reminds me of old school Sylvala when we were on Memory Jar and like doing like very similar things. Like, oh, blow up all your stuff, draw everybody out. We're gonna keep refilling our graveyard. Like, I'm with it.
Yeah, actually, I was kind of inspired by there's a Marwyn deck on the deck database that, like, there are some card choices that look really weird at first, but after playing with it, you realize that Marwyn has the ability to draw as many cards as it wants, and then beast within all of its opponents' like permanents, and then replay Kugla fighting those beasts to death. You can literally destroy everything your opponents have in play. When it wins, it has the potential to achieve this like ultimate game state where it can do whatever it wants to. It can replay any of its cards any number of times. And I was kind of like I guess inspired by that in some way when I was trying to look for deep wins like within the Magda possibilities.
That's awesome. I love that.
You'd asked earlier about tech cards, and I would be doing the deck a discredit if I didn't also mention the Bogarden Hellkite and Udvara Hellkite. These are two cards that almost nobody else in the Magda community was thinking about playing, much less actually slotting in for the tournament or an event that was competitive.
Yeah, because very important note, in addition to saying you could tutor up an artifact, Magda does also say you can tutor up dragons.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have overlooked this, right? So as I play tested Magda more and more and more, and more of my opponents began to understand Magda, you find yourself, I found myself constantly in this position where my opponents would not let me win, but they would keep me just below that. That's the idea, right? We want to keep our opponents from winning, but we don't want to overly burn them into the ground, because then someone else maybe wins if we misuse our resources. So when Magda is kept to this place where I want to win but I can't quite, and I've got my stacks pieces in play and they've got some stacks pieces in play, I'll find these scenarios where I'll have 5 treasures and I can search for something, but I can't search for a win. So one of the best cards to search for in a scenario like this, these stacks games, these late games, you lose. I felt like I would lose all the time to a Crom beatdown or to Najila, to some sort of like people attack. I get wrecked. I got some tiny little dwarves. They're short. They're not very good at combat, and I would get decimated on the battlefield. Dragons definitely changed the game. It was a player, Eric Loop, that first suggested I play Udvara Hellkite, and that card carried so many wins in my first 2 weeks of testing. I could almost, as soon as the game started, just choose immediately. Like if I see 2 stacks opponents, then my odds of being able to combo Clock when the time comes are low. They'll probably have me null rotted out or something when that happens. I may as well just start with Dragon as a win con, and then just as soon as I can get Udvara Hellkite in play. I'm already playing like 5 changelings, so my odds of attacking with 1+ Udvara Hellkite to make multiple dragon blockers, the game changes so quickly. That card was super great in testing, as well as Bogarden Hellkite. The same thing, it can come in at instant speed to block Crom. It can also kill Op Agent. It can also kill Dranith. It can also kill their combo. If they're going for an instant speed win combo that relies on the creature staying in play, Bogarden Hellkite comes in play, kills both of those, and some elves just for kicks as well. The cards were really, really good in testing, and in a tournament they didn't really let me down.
That's awesome, dude. Love the spice. I love this spice.
Plus, it's always fun to play dragons, right? Like, who doesn't like a good dragon in their deck list?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the coolest creature type in Magic history, right?
For sure. Gotta be. Especially for mono red. Well, goblins are pretty cool too.
Yeah, goblins are pretty cool. You did mention that Bogard and Hellkite, and both of the Hellkites didn't let you down during the tournament. And speaking of the tournament, we buried this like kind of all the way at the top, but at this tournament you did go 7-0. You did not drop. You did not drop a match of 4-player multiplayer Magic the Gathering across 2 days of competition, which is kind of insane. Congratulations, by the way. But in those 7 games that you won all of, there's got to be some interesting bits, right? So like, was there any moments across all of those games that kind of stood out to you as like specifically interesting or special or anything like that?
Honestly, to some extent, the same thing kept happening. Like in the final where the Abrupt Decay. Some people would say that Abrupt Decay was the true tournament champion. Magda just happened to be there, and I have a hard time arguing with that. And with that in mind, again, many of the wins were like that. I would start each match expecting to win in late game with dragons, and maybe if I get a Clock combo in the meantime, sweet, we'll go for it. And I expected my metagame to be... I expected opponents to know what Magda did. I expected opponents to discriminate against me the way my playtesting group had done. When people were just like, I don't care, you're playing mono red dwarves, like have a good time, like do your thing. I was like, for real? Sweet. Right? Like this is like Christmas for me. I just get to play Magic solo solitaire over here where you guys like kill each other. Let's go. Let's go awesome. That I think that lack of respect for Magda definitely earned some of those W's. That said, I definitely still think the deck is format viable. It just requires more careful gameplay, and it's definitely a very, very technical deck to play. I do not advise this deck for someone who doesn't feel like they've got a good understanding of the stack or responding to players or technical gameplay in general.
That's hilarious. Like, no one's gonna interact with me? Wait. My Magda's alive. I'm untapping. I have 5 treasures.
Right.
Okay. I like this game.
You're trying to win? I have 5 treasures and like a dwarf artifact?
That's more so how it would go, exactly. And again, many of my opponents didn't know that the deck could go at instant speed. So a lot of players, when they're piloting a combo deck, the second they have their combo, they'll jump on it, right? But I think more seasoned or experienced CEDH players will find that it's not the player who tries to win first that normally wins, it's the player who tries to win at the right time that ends up winning the game. That's one of my favorite things about Magda, is that like when I find combo, I don't need to go. In fact, I'm incentivized to not go. The more treasures and artifacts I stockpile before I go for the win, the more likely that I can respond to my opponent's interaction by just trying to win again on top of them on the stack. And that's exactly how I played it. I would get to that game state where it's like, I'm pretty sure I can win right now, but I don't really want to. Like, we'll just kind of chill for a second, right? And then opponents would play ad nauseum, and then someone forces ad nauseum, and then someone casts some bounce spell in response. It's like, okay, cool. I feel like you guys are pretty tapped out. I'm going to go ahead and just win the game now. And that's kind of how it just play out.
we've kind of danced around this a little bit, and we've referenced it like 2 or 3 times now. But obviously, a lot of people at the tournament didn't know how this worked, and maybe a lot of people who are listening don't either. Would you mind explaining the Clock of Omens Infinite Treasures loop to our listeners?
Absolutely. The Clock of Omens Magda combo revolves around 3 main pieces. 1, Magda should be in play. And 2, you need the Clock of Omens in play, which is an artifact. So using Magda alone, you could search for this by sacking 5 treasures. The third combo piece we need is any creature that is an artifact as well as a dwarf. There's some funny cards in the deck list, like I believe Ashnod's Transmogrant is the technical name for it, that don't really make any sense until you realize that this is exactly the combo we need to win. So I think there's something like 11 total artifact dwarves. We use some changelings, we use like the Metallic Mimic, and we use Ashnod Transmogrant. We use Liquid Metal Coating and Liquid Metal Torque. We have all of these draws that can turn our dwarf into an artifact, and then hopefully we just need to search up the clock and we can win right away. So the way the combo plays is you get dwarves in play, naturally, right? And it's important to note with many tools such as Crew, Convoke, or the tap lands, you can tap your dwarves at instant speed, or during another player's turn, giving you surprise treasures that maybe they didn't count on. So we'll get our dwarves in play, and now we need an artifact dwarf. So we'll either sack 5 treasures, or we'll play one of our cool artifact dwarves we were just talking about. And then we need to get our clock in play. So we'll get up to 5 treasures again. We'll sack them to go find clock. Now, Clock of Omens says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So the idea is that we'd get clock in play. We already have our artifact dwarf. We already have Magda. So we'll tap Clock of Omens and the untapped artifact dwarf to untap the artifact dwarf. Now, when we do this, when we activate Clock's ability, the artifact dwarf becomes tapped. So since it's a dwarf and it's tapped, we make a treasure from Magda. So this new treasure comes into play, and then when the Clock of Omens untap ability resolves, our dwarf is untapped again. So we'll just tap the dwarf again, as well as the new treasure we made, untapping the artifact dwarf again. So that's the loop, right? As the dwarf becomes tapped, it makes a new untapped treasure. We use the untapped treasure to tap with the dwarf to untap the dwarf again. And these treasures are all tapped, and that's kind of okay though, because we don't really want to use them for the mana right now. We're looking to sacrifice to Magda so we can go find other combo pieces to win the game. That's kind of why I say too that like the more artifacts you have in play, the more you can react or respond to players, right? So let's say I have 9 treasures and 3 other untapped artifacts like Soul Ring and Great Furnace, doesn't really matter. And I've got my artifact dwarf in play. I sack from 5 treasures down to 4 treasures to go search. Opponents are like, okay, sure, whatever, go find your thing. Clock of Omens comes into play. Big danger, right? So I'll tap Clock of Omens and the untapped dwarf and the metal dwarf to untap the dwarf. Opponent responds, that's no good at all. We'll destroy the Clock of Omens somehow, or shock the dwarf maybe. It's like, well, okay, well, while that ability is on the stack, I would like to tap 2 of my untapped treasures to untap the dwarf. Does that resolve? Cool. And now I'll tap my dwarf and another untapped treasure to just relight the combo, and you get to build on top of them. And the more artifacts you have in play, a player B is like, oh, no way, unsummon, get the guy out of here. No big deal. I'm going to tap Soul Ring and Great Furnace to untap the dwarf in response to that as well. And now I'll tap the artifact dwarf and another untapped treasure. You just get to keep going and going and going in response to their responses, as long as you have enough artifacts in play to outstack them, I guess. So that's why it's cool. You get to respond to the responses forever, depending on how many artifacts you have.
Awesome, man. Thank you for breaking that down. That is a miracle combo right there, bro. Like the amount of brain power.
With some practice, it gets pretty easy. But yeah, it's kind of weird to start out with for sure. Most combos kind of tend to play that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, so you explain the combo, right? I now know the combo. I'm an expert Magda player. Just kidding. I'm not. So rabbit's out of the bag, or out of the hat, if you will, metaphorically. How does Magda do now? Since Magda, big threat. Magda's on the board. How do you deal with people being aware of the combos in the deck?
So the funnest part moving forward is that because you're searching for any artifacts or dragons from your deck, Magda has an amazing ability to pivot, right? We could just play completely new combos. We could win in completely new weird lines. Like the clock line will probably never leave, but what we find when we search could totally change. So I'm excited to see how the deck naturally evolves to kind of flow around what opponents may play to prevent it. Like, for instance, the dragons that I'm playing, I'm excited to see what the next stage of that looks like. And then past that, opponents knowing how the deck works doesn't necessarily stop it from being potent. I'm afraid that for a while it's going to have the same fate that Krakashima has, where it's really hard to understand and it's kind of confusing. So when people play Krak, it's like, okay, I don't want to play that. I want to play Magic instead. No thanks. They'll just kill Krak with major discretion until Krak's gone. And that happens. It's as a part of the deck being complicated, and that's kind of inevitable for a while at least. But I'm hoping that it'll find a place long term where the competitive players will have an understanding of it and they can play around it and interact with it like they do any other competitive deck, like Marwyn, for instance. Marwyn's fine until it's not fine, and it's about knowing when the deck's about to win to keep it in check. And once that natural balance works out, I think the deck is going to be just fine. I don't think it's the best deck in the metagame. I don't think it's the best deck in the format, but I think it fits nicely into the natural rock, paper, scissors that CEDH kind of promotes or presents.
If you were to go to another tournament this weekend, what kind of changes do you think you would make to Magda? Or would you even still play Magda?
If I were to go to another tournament this weekend, I would play Winota 100%. Not that Magda isn't capable of winning, but it's a little too soon. I think that the amount of hate that Magda is going to get in the next month or so is going to be enormous. Such has been my testing experience so far, at least.
Yeah, suddenly everybody realizes that the 2 CMC commander that people have to be running for a reason is like not great to let stick around on the board.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of hard to interact with, again, especially with our deck full of like Flusterstorms and Dispel and cards that have no interaction with Magda whatsoever. Most of my opponent's lists and prepping for the final and semifinals, they only had like 3, maybe 4 cards in their deck that even interacted with Magda. So it's like, okay, cool. So like you guys are just going to sit there and do nothing while I try to win. And all of your spells that can interact are going to be interacting with each other. So I can just like watch you guys like blast each other out while I sit back and kind of chill and go for it whenever the moment comes. And that's exactly how it played out. Pretty lucky.
Okay, better to be lucky than good. Just kidding. You went 7-0.
For sure.
That's not how that works.
I would agree with that every time. As a Krog player, again, definitely would agree with that every time.
Hey, listen, the Krog players, man, they are lucky. You have to be lucky. I made a Krog deck, and I was like, you know what? Not for me. Not for me.
My personal record in the tournament is 9 tails in a row.
9 tails in a row.
Yep.
For those in the back, that's 9 failed spells in a row.
Yep. That's my personal all-time top record.
Gosh, that would hurt my heart so much. It hurts my heart hearing that. But no, just kidding. Krark is a whole thing. Okay, so tournament's over. It's time to go back to your regular life. What kind of stuff do you have going on beyond this event?
You know, it's pretty cool that you asked. My regular life, again, working at a card shop, it's just more Magic, and it's been more Magic than ever before, especially with all the community interest. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited to be a part of the online community. I'm excited to be a part of the Magic community in a more productive, beneficial way. And I really like, there are so many people that I would love to tip my hat to that have been promoting Magic in a fair way, without bias, without prejudice, looking for a fun game to bring people together instead of to be elitist or shoo people away. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that drive and what they stand for. The biggest two that come to mind are definitely joking, the tournament organizer Nicholas, who put together the Monarch tournament, and I believe he's the director of Monarch as well. They run the CEDH tournaments. That guy's got a great head on his shoulders. He's looking to make a fair, fun game for everyone, and I appreciate that. Of the many different competitive gaming discords I've been a part of, the Quark Discord has always been my favorite. And again, I have to tip my hat to Ken, who leads that Discord. He's very fair-minded. He's looking for opportunities for everyone to have a fair game, to be respected. And that's the kind of thing that we need to really focus on as we move into the future of Magic.
Wow, I love that, man. We've been asking you a lot of questions, my guy. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you for asking, and as a matter of fact, I do. So, being new to a lot of the online Magic scene, I guess you could say, I do have some questions for you guys. I can kind of feel overwhelmed at times by the number of different YouTube channels and Discords and everything going on. So, some help navigating this is kind of what I'm looking for here. My first question would be, what separates Playing with Power from the other similar Discord channels or YouTube channels?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it's particularly, I don't want to say that we like separate ourselves in any way, but I would like to focus on like what we do like to focus on. And I think what we do really well is we take a very complicated way of playing Magic the Gathering and try to distill it down into a consumable and understandable way as possible. Whether, from outlining our games to narrating our games, to editing our games, we try to make it very clear what's going on, try to explain complicated interactions, own up to it when things go wrong. Well, if things go wrong in a game, we usually just cut the gameplay, but explain what went wrong, why it went wrong, if we can't scrub the gameplay for whatever reason, all that kind of stuff. We take a lot of pride in trying to make CEDH as accessible as possible through our videos and through the other stuff we do, like this podcast. And I definitely don't want to say that separates us in any other ways from a lot of other channels, because there's a lot of people doing great work too in the CEDH sphere, and they all do it their own way. But we're very proud of the way that we do that.
I really appreciate that. It's funny because CDH oftentimes gets a bad rap. Oh, that's evil competitive Magic. That's not fun. But CDH doesn't need to be that way. And the drive that you just described is exactly what we need. We need a translation from this game that has like a 500-page rulebook to players who are just looking to play something fun and strategic. It's far more accessible to the average Magic player than they probably suspect. So taking the steps that you just described, man, that's really all I could ask for from a channel such as yours. So, I guess it's hard to I'm not sure if this would be to playing with Power in general or to you, Cal, or Alex, but whenever you start making a new deck and you're thinking that you might like this deck to be a part of EDH or CEDH, what would be the first 2 or 3 questions you ask yourself about whether or not you should make this deck and why?
Alex is definitely the brewmaster of the two of us. I'm a bit more of a deckless database kind of guy. Alex, take it away.
Probably first question is viability. And so looking at a commander, there's a lot of commanders that do kind of wonky things. And the question I ask myself, is there enough support for this mechanic or this thing that I could use like reasonably? An example of this, when they printed out the Stranger Things secret layer, I was like, oh, we can have 5 color partner pair. That sounds great. Like, I love this. Let's try and make it work. And it was just so impractical. Like trying to like force something to happen with especially with 11 being this like kind of odd 11 card thing. And so like, what are the viabilities? Is there enough support to really have this commander excel in a way that hasn't been seen before, or has been seen before but just does better? And I think the third question is how practical are the cards we most commonly see in CDH? How do they fit in this deck? So good examples of this is like commanders that are 3 color and have 3 colors in their commander cost. I would say can be really challenging because you want to play Jeweled Lotus in like every commander deck, but that doesn't necessarily work in commanders that have 3, 4, or even 5 colors in the cost of their of them. And so I always am looking for, okay, what can I do to get around that? And I've brewed a pretty substantial amount of decks and thought they were good, and then I actually sleeved them up and I played it and I'm like, these aren't good.
Very familiar with that feeling.
Right? And I'm always trying to push the boundary of like what is what's viable and what isn't viable, and that is something that I focus on quite a bit. And I think being accepting, I would say the fourth thing I would say is accept when a deck isn't CDH. Like, right? You have to be willing to accept that. Like, you can try to push it to its limit, but sometimes its limit is high powered or is casual, whatever. Despite having all these CDH staples in it. And I think that's just an important thing to admit, because a lot of the time people don't do that. And it leaves like a sour taste in your mouth because you're not winning with the deck. You put so much effort, so much work into it. You know your lines, but it just can't get there. And that's just that's just sometimes that's the way it is. Outside of like commander agnostic combos. Yeah, that's how I feel.
You can't get there yet, right? Those decks just go and they wait for the next printing of whatever random piece they need to become super viable out of nowhere. So fun.
Yeah, exactly. They just needed Jeweled Lotus to get printed, and now the deck's crazy. Well, that was it.
Absolutely. I'm kind of excited to see where Krinko's at now. I used to play Krinko casually back in the day, and I still don't think that he's necessarily going to make it to a really spooky competitive place, but same as before, like I played him a lot, and I thought he was a lot of fun to play, but at the same time, have to just admit he's not fast enough to really compete with what's coming out nowadays. Or wasn't, but I haven't tested him since Jeweled Lotus was printed. So that's a great example of one of my personal backwarmer bench decks that should be retested,
By the way, I do believe Krinko is viable.
Nice. Good to hear.
Have one of my cousin is a Krinko player, and it's just, it can just do things with Umbral Mantle. It's crazy.
Oh, for sure.
And so all right. Any other questions, good sir?
I mean, thanks for having me. It's cool to be here. I'm excited to see more of your guys' content coming up in the future. Are there any big tournaments coming up that you're excited about?
I don't know of any big tournaments coming up or anything. I know some of us are going to be going to SCG Con Pittsburgh pretty soon to just jam games for the channel, hang out with whoever is going to be there, play some CEDH. I won't be there. Alex won't be there, but other people of the Playing with Power team will be. Alex, do you know of any big upcoming tournaments?
Tier 1 Con.
Jeez, that's it's almost time for that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a few months away. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to look at those international tickets, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There are rumors that
Are you-
Marchesa might have another tournament. Not Marchesa, that Monarch might put up another tournament coming in fall. So I'm kind of keeping my ear to the ground for
Yeah,
that.
Oktoberfest. Yeah,
That'll be cool.
yeah, Oktoberfest. Yeah.
Now, if we could get them to have that in San Diego, listen, I'm down.
Hey, Oktoberfest is earmarked as the East Coast tournament. You already had your West Coast tournament. Now we get to have the East Coast tournament
That's
for
my
the other
understanding as
half
well.
of the CEDH community, buddy.
But everything is on the East Coast.
A lot of things are on the East
Everything
Coast.
it's on the East Coast. Anyways,
Dude, it's cool.
listen,
I'm in
just
Portland.
sour.
You come up to Portland. I got plenty of tournaments for you. We'll keep you busy.
Man, I just want one. I just want one in a driving radius, please. I don't want. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. I'm really it was great talking to the person who did the first 7-0 in a CDH major tournament. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It was such a fun time.
And today, we want to really ask anyone who's listening to this podcast, thank you so much again for listening, but what do you think about the deck choice? Are you interested in playing in CEDH tournaments yourself? And if so, how would you prepare for them? Honestly, there's a lot going on when it comes to preparing for CEDH tournaments, analyzing metas, what kind of cards have been released recently, anything new that you can exploit. These are things that are really important to think about when preparing for a CEDH tournament, and we'd love to hear what you might do, given being in Koibito's position.
Do you guys mind if I plug my store really fast too?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Cool. So my LGS, we're only located here in the Portland Beaverton area, and we're only in person, right? We don't have online sales or anything, but if you're ever in the Portland area, please come hook us up. Look us up, have a good time. We're the Clubhouse. We have a Discord as well, which I'll hopefully get in the comments. We like to talk about decks. We like to play games online. We like to play spell table games. We just like to play Magic. So if you're ever in the area, come give us a visit.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today, chatting about us with Marchesa, Magda, and more. A big thank you also to all of our sponsors, TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and viewers and listeners like you on Patreon. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a comment, like this video, and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcast aggregator is, please give us a review. You'd be surprised how much it helps other people who are interested in CEDH find us. You can also find Playing with Power on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, more. I'm the social media guy. I'm always trying to post more unhinged stuff everywhere I can, every day. All the links that we've talked about today are all in the episode notes. That wraps it up for this episode of the Playing with Power podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about your favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and or listening, and we will see you again next time.